Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining Harvard Education Press's webinar on the future of education. I'm Michael Higgins, the Associate Director of Marketing at Harvard Education Press, and we're thrilled to have 4 of our authors with us for this panel discussion. While more people continue to join, let me go over a few things. There will be time at the end for a Q&A session, so if you have questions for the panelists, please put them in Q&A. The session is being recorded, and everyone who registered will receive a link to the recording in a day or two. Now, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Cheryl Fields-Smith is professor and department head in the Department of Educational Theory and Practice at the Mary Frances Early College of Education at the University of Georgia. She's a former elementary school teacher and the author of Creating Educational Justice, Learning from Black Home Educators. Shaun R. Harper is the Clifford and Betty Allen Chair in Urban Leadership, University Professor and Provost Professor of Education, Business, and Public Policy at the University of Southern California. He is also the founder and executive director of USC's Race and Equity Center and the co-editor of The Big Lie About Race in America's Schools. Brent W. Maddin is executive director of the Next Education Workforce at Arizona State University. He is the co-author of Unlocking the Potential of Team-Based Staffing, a guide for school and system leaders. And our moderator, Kathleen deLaski, is the founder and board chair of the Education Design Lab. She's also a senior advisor to the Project on Workforce at Harvard University and teaches human-centered design and higher education reform at George Mason University. Previously, she spent 20 years as a journalist, including time as ABC News White House correspondent. She's the author of Who Needs College Anymore? Imagining a Future Where Degrees Won't Matter. Kathleen, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Michael. It's really exciting to be here with this group. And, one of the benefits of being on this panel is that we were all sent all the books and we got to read them. So I think it's going to be a great discussion. We always say it's a pivotal moment in education, K-12 and higher ed. But I don't know if the panel will get into this, right? But in my lifetime, I can't think of a time that has been more fraught, more areas of concern. And you could argue that, with crisis comes opportunity. So we're going to get into the good and the bad and the ugly, because, one of the common themes about all of our books, right, is that there's an optimism to them about what we can learn and practice and research-based practice. And I think that's why we're having such a great turnout for this panel. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to ask each of the panelists about their specific corner of the world that they've chosen to write their book about, but everybody's a broader expert than the topics of their books, right? And so we'll then have a section where we do more of lightning rounds around the broader themes that we see before us. Okay, so let's get started. Is everyone ready? We're going to start with Cheryl. I feel like we're on Hollywood Squares, So Cheryl, and I always like getting asked this question first. What prompted you to write this book? And, and what do you think that we can learn specifically about teaching students of color and embracing their families in any setting?
Thank you, Kathleen. Many things prompted me to write the book, but one thing, creating educational justice is a culmination of almost 20 years of me researching Black homeschooling. When I started back in 2006, no one else was doing it. And I wondered whether I should continue or not. And over the years, I've come to realize, and what this book represents is how much public school teachers, private school teachers, and home educators actually have in common, particularly when we want to put children first, when we care about the children, when we're trying to teach the entire child and considering the whole child in our education. Homeschool practices the book talks about how homeschool practices really align with progressive era educational approaches, the experiential learning, and putting the children first and giving them voice and choice in their learning. And this is what's working for Black children. And when we compare that to what we have today, I really wanted the book to offer encouragement, inspiration to teachers who in the heart of the heart know what's best for children, and encourage them to do what they know is good for children in their classrooms.
You know, in my field of human-centered design, we often look at extreme users, you know, so the outliers in a, you know, that are dealing with a barrier to see what you can learn from what's working for them and what their needs are. So, you know, what are some of the needs of the learners that you focus on, that actually in addressing them, you could address, you know, all, as you say, all learning in all settings.
Yeah, well, the book is based on the work of Nigerian Peters, who was a law professor at the University of Kansas. She wrote an article where she found Black home educators are the privacy protectors, in that they are, she reviewed the privacy laws, and she found that Black home educators are doing things like they're preserving Black childhood,
Mm,
creating breathing space for Black children to flourish, insulating Black children from distortions and distractions, and letting Black children self author their own lives. So, if you
mm,
think about those bases being how I'm defining educational justice based on her work, I wanted to see what are Black home educators doing that's as privacy protection in my data. What do I see? And when we look at, so first of all, there's Black home educators have tremendous empathy for public education. They want it to
mhm,
work. It's not unusual to find a Black home educator in the midst of a district's school board meeting, because it's very important to them that the schools are
mhm,
successful. They want they often tutor public school children, right, and
mm,
private school children. So they really do care about the education of everyone, not just their own children. And as far as what works is, you got to look at some of the reasons that they're choosing to homeschool. And it's usually, I've never had anyone say it's just one thing. It's usually a
right.
combination of things that kind of gets them to that point. But here's the important thing: the majority of them, it's a second or third choice. They
Hmm,
put their they put their children first in public and private school, but it didn't work. Why? Well, if you read my work, you see the labor, the emotional labor that goes into having your child labeled a troublemaker.
mhm,
So from the statistical point, it looks like it's the human side, the parental human side of the school to prison pipeline, your child being labeled a troublemaker, the discipline disproportionality statistics that have
mm,
continued to be problematic. And what is it like for a parent whose child has been positioned this way? They go in, they try to advocate, they'll say things to teachers like, you're not challenging my child, and they're not listened to. And so they have to rescue their children, save their children from the harm that if they continue being labeled a troublemaker, and it's hard to undo that label, there's damage that can be done to their child.
right.
Their child wants to learn, and so that they feel like they have to. So if we really care about children, trying to understand that there may be reasons for misbehavior that are tied to what's happening into the classroom. It might not all be the children's fault. There could be any number of reasons, but just opening ourselves up to what might we do as teachers,
Mhm,
if we had the flexibility to implement those things. So it's not unusual to hear a home educator say, "Well, I realized, my goodness, one recess wasn't enough. We needed a break. There's too much, you know, on time. They need a little bit of more downtime than just one time a day. And so they break periodically. And, is there room for that in today's public schools?
Mhm.
Um,
Okay, well, so your book is really, focuses in on sort of one set, and it's a fairly small subset, but you go deep with these families and you
right.
learn a lot about them. And so we'll come back to you, but
Okay.
let's move to Shaun, whose book is, I think it's kind of like what my book got put into this category by HPA. It's like a big idea book, right? You're taking a broader look at race in both K-12 and higher ed. And I'd like to ask you the same question I asked Cheryl, which is, what prompted you to write this book? And we should say you probably finished writing it in, like a year ago, before some of the, the most recent, headlines and challenges are happening, in 2025.
Yeah, well, thanks, Kathleen, and also many thanks to Harvard Education Press for publishing our books, as
Yeah,
well as bringing us all
you're
together
here.
today. It's a privilege to be here.
Mhm.
Let me start by acknowledging my co-editor and colleague and friend, Royelle Johnson. Royelle and I took this on because we care deeply about our democracy. We are rooting for America. Um, Also, speaking for myself, um, I was so excited in an interesting kind of way, excited to do this because I'm a truth teller. And frankly, I don't like it when teachers, professors, school administrators, and staff people, our colleagues, are lied on.
Mhm.
Um, so many lies have been told in recent years about what's happening in K-12 schools and on college campuses broadly under the banner of DEI, but more specifically about race. Most
Mhm.
educators I know are good people who are also rooting for America. They want America to be its best, and they are committed to preparing students, future generations of adults, to advance America and deal with racial problems that have, frankly, forever gotten in the way or undermine our democracy, actualizing its full potential. So, it was those things that, really compelled Royelle and me. And listen, the two of us know a lot about this, but we recognize that we don't know everything. There are other colleagues who are tremendously expert on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and racial justice and racial equity. So we saw this as an opportunity to set a table to bring other experts in with us who know the truth about what's happening in schools and who were willing to bring their data and their evidence to their chapters to help raise the consciousness of our nation about the ways in which folks are being misled.
Mhm. So you mentioned that it is an edited volume, so you've got a number of writers doing different chapters. The chapter that you authored is called 10 Truths and One Very Big Lie. We don't have time to go into the 10 truths right now, but I think the suspense was building when I was like trying to get to the end of your chapter. What is the very big lie?
Yeah, let's leave the cliffhanger about the 10 truths. I think that's a good strategy because I want people to buy the book,
Okay,
to actually go and seek out those truths.
great.
Just know that those truths are absolutely substantiated with lots and lots and lots of very rigorous evidence. So I'll just say that. The big
Right.
lie is that America's school children and college students are being indoctrinated, that they're being taught to hate America, that they're
Mhm.
being discriminated against routinely, systematically, and so on because of race. The big lie is that they are also being divided into two camps, privileged and oppressed. Listen,
Mhm.
I do a lot of professional development work in schools and on college campuses. it's a serious point of pride for me that I'm not just a sort of ivory tower academician who doesn't know what's actually going on campuses. I am often on campuses, and I'm telling you right now, I don't go to places where folks are being sort of put into two rooms, privileged and oppressed, but
Right.
yet, the proponents of the big lie will have you believe that that is happening everywhere. It's not true. Similarly, another component of the big lie is that people of color are being told that they are less than. Like, no, I mean, yeah, that they're less capable, and that I don't know. It's just is I don't know where people are getting these things from. They're just really inconsistent, both with what I study and what I observe in schools. And
So
ultimately,
at the
yeah, go for it.
I was going to say at the end of your book, you describe sort of 5 action steps because I think individually these things are not going to come as a surprise to people, but I think when you kind of set up what to do about it, I think that's quite compelling.
Yeah, you know, I won't give them all away because
Okay,
again,
right. We want people to read the
because
book.
I want people to read the book. But I will say, right, that my sense is, at least based on feedback that we've gotten from people who have in fact read the book, is that the recommendations are so reasonable and
Hmm.
they're so pro-democracy. They're not divisive. They're not anti-American. I think we need more of that, not less of it. But frankly, we also need people to demand more proof and more evidence, because otherwise, I'm afraid that, particular news networks and social media channels and platforms and so on will dupe Americans, many, many more Americans, into believing things that just are not true.
Hmm. Right. And part of it is like crossing the 2 parallel universes that exist now in the news media, right? Okay, we could spend the whole hour on this, of course, but we also want to bring in Brent Maddin here, who, your book is really a playbook for schools that want to consider a team-based staffing model. And, I gathered from reading the book that that team-based teaching has come a long way since I was in first grade and was myself subject to a giant classroom with we had 4 groups all in the same classroom being taught by like rotating teachers, and I don't know, maybe they enjoyed it, but it was sort of chaotic, right? And we all had names that also suggested whether we were the smart group or the not smart group, which also, even as a first grader, was sort of cringe to me. But I gather that the model has come a long way, and you in Arizona at ASU are, really building an evidence base and winning a lot of converts as you go. So tell us a bit about it.
Well, thanks, Kathleen. And again, Shaun and Cheryl, so great to read your books. Thanks for having us
Yeah.
here, echoing Shaun's gratitude. Um, yeah, I think the models have come a long ways. Larry Cuban, educational historian, described in a blog post from a few years ago, team-based staffing was like a comet that shot across the sky and sort of disappeared into cosmic dust in the 60s and into the 70s. The reality is that this notion of if we center our students, and Cheryl, some of what you were describing in terms of like, please let me be seen, right? Known by name and served by strength and need. I said before you humbly, as a nationally board certified teacher, teaching is so freaking hard. It is very complex work, right? And so we have constructed a way of organizing the adults around young people that is just it's an exceptionally hard task. And so yes, what you're describing in the 1960s, I mean, it sounds like cacophony, it sounds like kids could be lost. um, the models today are not that, and we're lucky enough to be arm in arm doing work with educators and educational leaders, communities, now in about 200 schools, across 50, 60, 70 school systems, where hundreds of educators and thousands of kids are experiencing school in a different way. where instead of putting third grade at the center or putting science at the center, we put kids at the center, and then you build a team of educators. And I'm using that word really intentionally because it's, yes, at our professional teachers, but it is also members of our community, and it's para-educators having a different voice in our schools, in our systems, so that what we can do is to be able to deliver on this promise of all students experiencing the best that each educator has to offer. This notion that I have to be all things to all people at all times is just it's an astoundingly complicated task. But instead, if we can bring educators together, I think that we actually do have a different chance to deliver on some of these promises of justice for all, right? Of centering our learners in new and different ways. And we are seeing things like we've seen schools, and this is part of the evidence base, Stevenson Elementary, which anyone that wants to come in Arizona and see these models in action, we have opportunities to come and see it in action. They've seen the suspension rates drop from 72 to 7, right? Over the course of 3 years. And when we talk about creating opportunities for young people, the first thing is they've got to be in the building, right? There's just a fair baseline, and they need to be treated with respect, and they need to have the dignity. And this is what we're really excited about. Again, how do we set our educators up to be successful, lean into their strengths, and ensure that our students are known by name and served by strength and need?
One of the blurb writers on the back of your book wrote, I'm convinced that teachers are not leaving the profession, they're leaving the working conditions. I was really struck by that with our teacher shortage in so many places and retention rates. So this model sets out to improve the environment. Can you say a few words on how teachers are responding?
They're responding quite well. We're doing some work in Albuquerque Public Schools, working closely with the teachers union there, and they have a saying, right? Done with us, not to us. And what we find is that when you start small, and often in the work that we do, we work arm in arm. We are essentially a center that sits within a higher ed institution within the Mary Lou Fulton College for Teaching and Learning at Arizona State University. But we're lucky enough to be working with, now hundreds of schools across the country. And never do we say, hey, here's an idea. You should scale this across your entire district overnight. That's a terrible idea. You shouldn't do that. Instead, you should look for places where you can seed the idea and you can build something with your community, with your educators. And what we find is that the idea starts there and then takes off. And it's not us from ASU. It's not the superintendent saying, hey, you should do this thing. It's families advocating for this. It's teachers and other educators advocating for a different way of staffing our schools. Because at the end of the day, right, if I'm a teacher, I kind of want to go to the bathroom when I want. I want to go and have a medical appointment, not in June, but when I need it, right? If I need to go to a professional conference, I should be able to do that without a steeplechase. And this actually, it helps to professionalize our profession, and it helps to deliver, I think, on the thing that educators want to do best, right? Which is to work with young people, and to do it together as a team is a completely different way of orienting. And I think it's how we're hardwired as humans. And it leans into those collective strengths and ways of being.
Right. I mean, to work in community is it's such a better situation for most workers, right? They want to work with others.
Turns out.
Okay, good. So, all right, now we're coming to the portion where we're going to take some general questions on before we we see some questions going into the Q&A, but remember to press on the Q&A button as a place to put your questions, and we'll get to those in a little bit. But first, let's do a round. This panel is called The Future of Education, and we all acknowledge that both K-12 and higher ed, I've been in both fields myself, are in a crisis mode. With K-12, we've got test scores, classroom engagement levels. We've talked about the mental health of students and teachers to raise some issues, beyond the things we've already talked about. At the higher ed level, we've got free speech concerns, the DEI issues we talked about, supports for marginalized populations, and more systemically, as I talk about in my book, there's a concern about the reputation of the college degree itself and whether people feel that it's worth the cost and affordability. And, should we have other models? And, I argue yes in my book. And I argue that the 4-year degree model as the really college or bust mentality is really adding to the political resentment that we see increasing in the country. So we can talk about that a little bit more, whether the college for all movement, which is noble, but to some extent it's waving the white surrender flag. And in the age of AI, people are questioning whether we need whether we need new models. We definitely need new models. And the question is, what are they? They're not moving fast enough. So let's turn first to a sort of a general chance for you all to say something about the future in your field. So Brent, let's start with you. And actually, in my book talks I'm doing, we always end up at AI, at least since about April, when it really seeped into the kind of national narrative, the question about what happens with, in schools, in the job market when you try to graduate. Okay, so what do you think about how AI in your environment, how is it changing education? What do you foresee? What do you worry about?
Yeah. I think that we can answer this question at a few different levels. One is the level of the
Yep.
individual student, right? And the experience that they're having in classrooms, in learning spaces. Where I'd focus most of my answer, though, is really around how AI is potentially changing the role of the educator.
Mhm.
And 2, 3, 4 years ago, as we were building these models, people would often ask me, like, Brent, like, should we actually invest in the work that you're doing, or should we just be focused on our artificial intelligence? We see what's coming, and my answer was always the same, which was that we need a new way of thinking about bringing adults around young people, and that we believe that these team-based models are a great way to do that. But what it's going to do is it's going to allow whatever's around the corner. It's going to allow, instead of a one teacher in one box, either all day elementary school or until some Pavlovian bell rings in secondary school, it allows us to change the operating system. And now with the introduction of AI, whether that's student facing or that's educator facing, what we're finding is that those that have adopted a team-based approach are able to navigate the uncertainty that's coming in wildly different, and I would argue better ways. And so in that sense, I'm actually in some ways imbued with hope that this actually is an opportunity to allow our educators to focus more of their time and attention, not on the pedestrian tasks that sometimes gobble up huge amounts of teacher time, but rather to be focused on what are the things that we can do uniquely as educators. And we think that in the context of a team-based approach, in some ways, AI is an assistant in that
Right.
team, allowing us to be, you could say, high tech, but more importantly, high touch.
Mm-hmm. Well, I also want to weigh in on this theme, but I want to give a chance to, if either Shaun or Cheryl want to say something about the impact of AI, I'll give you a chance. No, how about you,
I
Cheryl?
I can say that from my perspective, I think it's not right to ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are, but I cannot. Instead, I'm teaching my future teachers how to use it. So
Mm-hmm.
just yesterday, I had a scholar at UGA who studies AI in education come into my classroom, and we used AI to create lesson plans, and then they evaluated the quality of those lesson plans and made decisions for themselves that it's a great start, but it didn't do this, which is what they're learning in my class. So it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't personalized enough in terms of being culturally responsive to the students, for example. And across the board, my students, you know, realized that yesterday. And so we can use it to save time, to generate ideas, but we don't stay there. We have to use our own, what we know
Right.
about ourselves as teachers, what we know about our students and their needs to, make it more relatable to our
Right.
classrooms.
Well, I'd like to add something on the positive side and something on the negative side. On the positive side, I would argue that, we need to move to a what I call a stepladder approach to the degree and to higher education in order to keep up with both technology and the needs of the workplace and, frankly, the consumer habits of Americans, right? They're demanding a more modular approach. We see that from the rise of certificate. That's the fastest growing type of college enrollment today. And AI, I think, gives us the possibility to convert learning outcomes to the skills that are demanded. So, and when we think about skills-based learning, it's been very difficult to make it happen. But with the rise of AI, as one person I interviewed in my book just said, it gives us a racetrack to get there faster. We can create short-term learning stacks and learning venues, and we can ask employers for their skills, the skills that they need in closer to real time. AI will help us, basically create the curriculum that we need to move faster. On the bad side, and I'm teaching a class, I teach at George Mason University in Virginia. It's a large public. I'm teaching a class in the spring called How to Get Hired in the Age of AI, because that's, I think, on the negative side, we're very worried about that first rung of the career ladder. And I think that has, when you look backwards all the way down through K-12, a lot of implications for, if the kind of entry-level knowledge economy jobs are going away to some extent, some of them will go away, not, obviously not all of them. What's the impact, down the line? What does that mean about getting a college degree? What do you major in? What skills do high schoolers need to have? What skills do middle schoolers need to have? I think, those things we need to backwards map and think about the impact all the way down the line. Let's move to another one of these questions about the future, and let's focus this time on what's the future of DEI. And Shaun, we'll start with you on this one.
Sure. I think there is no future without DEI, or put differently, DEI is an inescapable feature of a productive democracy. The opposite of diversity is homogeneity. The opposite of equity is inequity, and the opposite of inclusion is exclusion. Most Americans would agree that those alternatives are harmful to our democracy. They're not what we want. I'm going to take this out of education for just a second, even though versions of this actually do occur in some educational contexts. But I'm a person who insists, I feel very strongly, that women must receive equal pay for their performance of equal work. Without policies, programs, and professional learning opportunities and accountability measures, that problem is only going to worsen, the problem of women being underpaid. That's not right. And I think that if that problem continues to sustain, but certainly if it worsens, at some point, women, men, and genderqueer people are going to stand up and say, we've had enough of this. We got to fix this issue. The same thing with school climate issues, the same thing with racial inequities in student discipline and student academic performance, the same thing with the underserving of students with disabilities, the same thing with Islamophobia and anti-Semitism on campuses. You see, without diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, people, and policies and offices, all of those things are only going to worsen, and they're going to lead to greater divisiveness. They're going to lead to greater inequity and, frankly, more conflict between groups. So I think that, honestly, I realize that right now, lots of folks have convinced themselves that DEI is dead. It's not dead. It will
Or it's
never
gone
die.
underground, right? It's in a lot of cases, it's just gone underground.
I'm not even sure that it's gone underground. I think that just at this point, there seems to have been a bit of a flatlining, but
Yep.
it is temporary at best. It's not sustainable. right?
Mhm.
Moving forward with K-12 schools and higher ed institutions without any diversity, equity, and inclusion infrastructure, policies, programs, and so on, it's not sustainable. It's going to lead to way, way, way too much chaos. So I do believe that in the future, we will see those things reemerge. And my hope is that they reemerge with more funding, and that they reemerge in ways that are deeper, more meaningfully embedded in educational institutions, and that they're ultimately sustained. They're
Yeah.
built back in a much more durable and sustainable fashion.
Mhm. Did anyone else want to add to that one? Have a comment on DEI? You answered that very well, but
Thank you.
anyone else
I
want to?
just want to, for me, a hope for the future that we can better understand the divisive concept laws and policies that have been put into place that seem to be oppressing, not seem to be, they are oppressing DEI. If you look carefully at the laws, they don't prevent us from teaching about people of different, different backgrounds. It says, for the one in Georgia anyway, you can't teach that one is better than the other. One group is
Mhm.
better than the other. You can't teach in a way that makes somebody feel shame. These are common sense things. If
Right.
we really just need to look at the laws, they're not really preventing DEI from being taught.
Mhm.
Plus, we have had a couple of instances at my institution, and what leadership has told us is look at your standards. In higher ed, for pre-service teachers, we have standards that require us to teach teachers how to teach students of different individual identities.
Mhm.
That's DEI, folks.
Right.
You have to teach it.
And maybe the thing, a couple of quick things that I would add here too is that within these models that we're building, that these are helping schools to build, if you've got 2 or 3 or 4 teachers that are sharing this common roster of students, um, there are suddenly it's a lot less lonely as you're tackling
Mhm.
some of these questions, that you should be engaged in dialogue, that there are productive conversations across lines of difference and diversity of thought, and that we need to be modeling these things for our young people, both as part of the explicit curriculum and the implicit curriculum. And that there is power in that, and I think that we need to be able to have discourse and to be able to actually grapple with the topics of the moment. And I'd
Mhm.
say, finally, like, I'm really proud to work at an institution that at Arizona State University that has this commitment to inclusive excellence, that has a commitment to a public charter that is, on monoliths outside of our institution. To say that we are an institution that will be measured by who we include as opposed to who we exclude, and how well those people do when they are with us. Like, that is such a profound statement.
Mhm.
And that it's imbued in all of the sort of work that we do. When you think about the way that most schools are organized, and the way that particular teachers are assigned, Professor Linda Darling Hammond has a lot to say about this, right?
Yes.
That there are ways that, by the way that we have designed our schools, that we are systematically denying people opportunity, right? And so, there's a reality that it isn't that you should be vying for a particular third grade teacher. Why can't we all have all of the teachers, right?
Right.
And that just takes some of the game out of the whole thing, right? If I have the time to advocate for a particular teacher, right? Maybe my kid gets a particular teacher. But what if you don't have that kind of time? We've just systematically designed, in at least the work that we're doing, a solution to this problem, or
Right.
at least a partial solution to this problem, which is that, can we stop systematically denying people access to the best educators? No, like, actually, let's let all students have access to all the educators, and let's let the educators lean into their particular areas of strength. This makes everyone better. And it makes the job more sustainable, more doable, and quite frankly, more fun for
Right.
educators. I want people that are enjoying themselves to be teaching my kids.
Right. So we have time for just this last question, which will help us end on an optimistic note, or end before we go to questions from the audience. And that is, I'd like us each to kind of do a lightning round answer about what's an opportunity that we see. That never waste a good crisis is, off-cited term. What do you all think about a trend line, or an opening, or a practice that you talk about in your book, or one that you don't talk about in your book, that you think is actually, if we pull the string on it, it could really be a solution set for us. I mean, I'll start so give you guys some more time to think. My something that I've was amazed to learn over the past 2 to 3 years as I was writing the book, and it sort of caught, I think, higher ed by surprise, is that the fastest growing type of college student is actually a high school student who is dual enrolled. That 1 out of 5 community college students today is a high school student. And in my nearby at Nova, my Northern Virginia Community College here where I live, at the Loudoun County campus, half the students, 5,000 of the 10,000 are, students who come from high school every day to go to college. And to me, the opportunity is that, we say we need to break down the silos, particularly between high school, college, and work. Wow, if this is already happening and there are funding models in place to allow it to happen, can we intentionalize dual enrollment to really make it more of the millions of students who are doing, can we make it more intentional to, solve for the problems that we're having with, pipeline and people having career exposure and getting certifications, et cetera. So that's my dual enrollment. That's my, who wants to go next?
Yeah, I'll go next. And let me just say that I am a huge proponent of dual enrollment. I love it, especially when it is offered in an equitable fashion.
That's
And
right.
it is not yet another vehicle that creates, disparity
And that
between.
is changing around the country.
Yeah.
Starting to change. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Love dual enrollment. So I'll go next. And I don't know, it's going to sound like I'm trying to sell people books. Maybe I am. I think that our book itself gives me some hope. It gives me tremendous hope, right? The book, spoiler alert, is not a dumpster of radical wokeness and people just having been brought together with all sorts of, sort of cockamamie ideas. Like, no, these people came together. They're legitimate scholars who care about our democracy, and they came together with evidence and data, and they leverage that evidence and data to raise the consciousness of our democracy. I want to see more of that. And finally, we are starting to see, especially, now in the latter half of 2025, coalitions emerge of very smart people who know the truth and who have access to the truth. And they're coming together not in a one at a time fashion, but they're coming together collectively to leverage those truths in defense of our democracy. I think that is a scalable thing. I think we need more of that. I think it's time out for just, opinions and baseless claims. I think we need folks to come together to, leverage the evidence collectively. And I'm super proud that our book, provided at least a platform for very credible scholars to do that.
Okay, who wants to go next? A point of optimism for us.
I'll go next. In homeschooling, we see the trends since COVID that homeschooling is increasing.
Oh.
And it's increasing among families of color, Latino families, particularly under the current conditions with the threat of being, sent back, and they are increasingly homeschooling. Black families are increasingly homeschooling. And the good thing that's coming out of that is communities are coming together that normally wouldn't come together. And they're creating these educational experiences for children. They can't necessarily get them in public schools where they can direct their learning, individualize instruction, but kids are thriving. But what I wonder is, what is that tipping point?
Mm-hmm.
And enough people have made this choice, and as we see more and more structures, so single families can now homeschool in some places.
Mm-hmm.
Families who have less income than you would imagine would they can homeschool is necessary. You can homeschool and you know be low income now in some communities. And as it becomes more and more accessible, what's the tipping point where school districts will finally listen to families and do the changes that are best for children? I'm optimistic that that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead, Brent. You have the last word on this, and then Michael will come on and help us with the question file.
Um, I think uh, this is going to sound maybe like not a point of optimism, but things like declining enrollment, which a number of schools are navigating, or what is happening with artificial intelligence. These things are, in some ways, these Sputnikian moments that I think are allowing us to question some very long-held assumptions in education, and creating, in some ways, the necessity of all invention, right? Never let a good crisis go to waste. Um, I think it is really allowing us to think differently at some of the most fundamental aspects of the grammar of schooling. And so whether that's what counts as assessment, I think AI allowing us to assess students in wildly different ways, or this one teacher, one classroom model that I see just again, the schools with whom we're lucky enough to work, moving away from, and educators in those models saying things like, I've been teaching for 30 years, and I feel like now, even though I've got 75 students that I share with my team, I feel like I know them better now than ever before. Or something like artificial intelligence being able to take three heretofore siloed content areas to create really rich and rigorous interdisciplinary learning that's far closer to what we think of as the way that the world works, as opposed to asking teachers to figure that out on their own. So I think technology and some of the other pushes in terms of budgets or declining enrollment are going to allow us to question long-held grammars of schooling, and we should take advantage of that.
That goes for both K-12 and higher ed, I think.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, Michael, you want to give us questions?
Sure.
Tell us what the audience is thinking.
Yeah. Well, the audience has a lot of questions, and we're not going to be able to get to all of them. But here's a question for all of you, I guess. It says, do you see practices in K through 12 education becoming less uniform due to the decline of federal oversight? And is this a challenge, opportunity, or both?
Great question. Who wants to tackle? And maybe we'll just have one person, do you think, Michael, too, in order to try to get through more questions?
Yeah, sure. So the question is just whether K through 12 education has become less uniform because of the decline in federal oversight. And is that good or bad, or, challenge or an opportunity?
I think it's probably too early to know for sure. I also want to acknowledge that education largely belongs to the states. So I'm not sure that we're seeing the same degree of deregulation and oversight at state levels that we're seeing in the federal government. So I'm not sure. It's still early, but yeah.
Then let me see. Someone asked, what do you hope to be true in 10 years in U.S. public K through 12 education or Kathleen, in your instance, higher education, based on your research and practice? What would you like, what do you hope to be true in 10 years?
I can start with that one on higher ed, but I think it seeps down into certainly to high school. I was probably most surprised in writing my book that when I went and interviewed families, that, almost to a person, people want additional models, not just college or bust, and or not just, trade school, which, has a traditional connotation. They want additional pathways, and you see them existing in pockets, but they are so underfunded, underevaluated, and the narrative doesn't even, people don't even know about them. And these are apprenticeships, short-term, pathways, and the kinds of boot camps that exist to help you into professional roles, not just to be a welder, which is a noble profession as well. And so what I hope is true in 10 years is that, and I do think AI will help on this, right? That it will be that pathways, multiple pathways will be funded, visible, and evaluated. And I do think the short-term Pell legislation that passed this summer will help a little bit on that. Does anybody want to answer that for K-12?
I mean, the thing that I just put into the chat, if we've moved from teacher directed to student centered, hopefully moving in that direction to something that ultimately looks, I think, in some ways what Cheryl is writing about, which is student and family directed. This notion that right now we put the kids at the center and we build teams around them. What if the students and the families themselves were building the teams around them? That the lines will blur between what we know of as traditional school and the outside world. I hope in really productive and ways that advance equity, but we'll need to guardrail against that. And if there was one point of like, oh my gosh, I'm freaking out, it's that this idea of hyper personalization, I think, is probably bad for our democracy. That if we bubble ourselves too much, if we are in our own specific feeds, right, that there's something. For me, it was like Saturday morning cartoons back in the day because we all watch the same thing, right? But if we're all, on our different channels, I just think that we need these common grounding experiences, and we cannot lose the humanity of what I think school represents in some quest for hyper-personalization.
Along those same lines, Brent, I do see some of my participants changed states in the middle of the study. And so compared to Georgia, Missouri, for example, is very different in their homeschool laws. Missouri does not count their home educators at all. And the family that moved to Missouri told me they were able to move fluidly between their homeschool practice and the public school in Missouri. So if that's happening now in Missouri and it's working, that would be lovely if we could open that up some more in 10 years. Just listening to what kids need. Parents are capable of teaching their students, but I always tell people I would not want to have to teach my children chemistry, for example. So I would need another entity to do that for me. I wouldn't want anything to blow up. It just would be a bad thing. But having a place where they could go and being the public school for things like that they don't feel they can do, or they don't want to do, or they think the school can do better, so that the children have the best of multiple contexts. That would be great in the future, I think.
There are a lot of questions about AI, but I'm just going to ask you this. It says, how can we ensure that our responses to AI use don't unintentionally deepen educational inequities, particularly for students, families who lack access to technology or AI tools?
Yeah, I'll take that one. I think we have a tremendous opportunity here for federal and state government, as well as corporate and philanthropic investments into ensuring that that does not happen, right? To ensuring that AI does not, become yet again, an engine that creates new inequities in the ways that we saw with the internet. And certainly, one thing that became really clear during the earliest days of the pandemic, with the inequitable, broadband and Wi-Fi access, that exacerbated inequities for low-income Americans. So I think that AI is still emergent enough that we can get ahead of this in
Mhm.
ensuring that low-income schools, community colleges, historically Black colleges and universities, tribal colleges, and so on, that those institutions get the kind of upfront infrastructure investments now, so that we aren't trying to undo the inequities, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now.
Mhm. Yeah, and if I could just say, I think at both the higher ed and the K-12 level, the other thing that we need to be doing, and AI just brings it home, is we need to start credentialing the human skills that, people say, oh, well, human skills will become more important. But the problem is that human skills, we just think people pick them up along the way. We're not intentionalizing them in a way that somebody could, put it on their resume or have an industry recognized credential if they do something like this in the new dual enrollment classes, for example. That we need to make that accessible to a broader population so that people have the fluency, the AI fluency, to know how to position themselves in an AI first world.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one last question. What innovations or policies are needed to ensure all students have equal access to quality education in the future?
I mean, I'll start here and say that we just hosted a set of in partnership with the National Conference of State legislatures in CSL, a site visit for about 70 state senators, representatives, and their staffers, to see what it could look like to think differently about the way that we do school. And the idea of creating the space and de-risking the opportunity to think differently about the way that we do schools is something that I think that state legislatures can do. They can create innovation zones and funding opportunities, because in our experience, talking and yapping about this stuff is one thing, but really actually coming and seeing it in real life, and then also seeing it in your local context, that this isn't just an Arizona thing or a Massachusetts thing, but rather this could be something that works in our own local environment, is really important to do. That said, you should come see our work in Arizona.
I will say, Brett, a lot of people had questions about the work you're doing, actually, and team-based staffing and how that works.
Mhm.
So I hope people get your book and learn more about it.
Yeah,
We tried to write a book that was what I would tell a principal or a friend or someone could give to a school person in their local district. Hey, check this out. Do a book study on it. It's what we've been learning and amplifying the voices of all these educators. Sorry, Shaun, over to you.
No. I'll just weigh in quickly on the question. I will say that I think if we ask the people, they will tell us. And by the people, I mean students, families, community members, and educators who make our campuses diverse. If we ask them, what are the kinds of innovations that will help fundamentally improve their experiences and their outcomes, they will have some ideas. They will tell us. Then it will be on us to do something with those ideas. I just feel very strongly that we shouldn't leave it to, so-called very smart ivory tower academics to sort of determine the answer to that question on our own. It should be very much informed by actual intelligence. See what I did there? The other AI, not artificial, actual
I like
intelligence
that.
from the people who have to live, learn, and work in these places. If we sought out that actual intelligence and then did something with it, we would in fact see innovation, and we will in fact see equity.
Thank you all so much for a great discussion. I think people learned a lot. So
Thank you
you.
for having us, and thank you to the other authors too.